didn't tell him what my company actually does. I didn't mention the contract. He found out on his own. And that's the part I keep coming back to. I didn't do anything. I just showed up. My name is Leah. I'm 31 years old, and for most of my adult life, my family treated my career the way you treat a relative who shows up to Christmas dinner uninvited. You don't make a scene, but you don't set a place at the table either. I'm an electrician. Licensed, bonded, insured. I own a small electrical contracting company in Columbus, Ohio. We do commercial work mostly, office builds, restaurant fit-outs, the occasional warehouse. I have 11 employees. I've been in business for 4 years. None of that mattered to my brother. My brother, I'll call him by what he is, not his name, is 34. 3 years older than me. He works at a financial advisory firm downtown. Nice suits, nice car, lease, not owned, but nobody in my family knew that except me. Because I'm the one he called when he was 3 payments behind 2 years ago. I didn't tell anyone. That's the kind of sister I was. Growing up, he was the one my parents pointed to when they wanted to show something off. Not because he was cruel. He just fit the picture they had in their heads of what success looked like. A desk, a salary, a title with the word senior in front of it eventually. I was good at different things. I liked knowing how stuff worked. I took apart the family's dead microwave when I was 14 just to understand why it stopped. My dad thought it was strange. My mom said nothing. My brother said, "Leah, that's so weird." I enrolled in community college after high school because that's what you did in our family. But by the end of my 2nd semester, I knew it wasn't for me. Not because I couldn't do it, but because I was watching the clock every single class while the guy who came to fix the breaker panel in the building next to ours was walking out at 3 p.m. with a belt full of tools and a look on his face like he had somewhere real to be. I dropped out in April of my freshman year. I told my parents I was taking a break. My mom got quiet in the way she gets quiet when she doesn't want to have a fight. My dad said, "Don't make this a permanent thing." My brother didn't say anything, which was somehow worse. I applied to an apprenticeship program through the IBEW, International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 683. 5 years of paid on-the-job training, classroom instruction, and a real wage while you're learning. I didn't tell my family right away what it was. I just said I had a job. The first year was hard in ways I didn't expect. Not the work itself. The work made sense to me in a way that sitting in a lecture hall never had. But I was 20 years old, showing up to job sites where the average age was 45, and I was a woman, and I was the new person, and those 3 things together made every single morning feel like a test I hadn't studied for. There was a foreman named Ray on my first big commercial site. He handed me a fish tape on my first day and told me to run conduit through a drop ceiling for 8 hours. I did it without complaining. He didn't say anything at the end of the day. The next morning he handed me something harder. That's how it worked. You proved yourself through the work, not through what you said about yourself. I learned to love that. My family, meanwhile, had decided to have a collective, unspoken agreement that my career was something we didn't discuss at the dinner table. When they asked, "How's work?" they meant it the way people say, "How are you?" They didn't actually want the answer. So I stopped giving them one. "Fine," I'd say. "Good." And we'd move on. I got my journeyman's license at 25. My mom said, "That's nice, honey." My dad asked if I was going to go back to school now that I had some work experience under my belt. My brother was in the middle of a promotion at the time, and that's mostly what we talked about at dinner. I didn't resent it. Or I told myself I didn't. I started the company at 27. I'd saved for 2 years, built a relationship with a general contractor named Phil who trusted my work, and convinced a commercial property management company to give me a small retainer for maintenance calls. I registered the LLC, Leah Harmon Electric, LLC. on a Tuesday afternoon at the county clerk's office. It cost me $99 and 45 minutes of my life. The first year, I netted about $34,000. Not impressive on paper, but I was the only employee. I was still doing most of the labor myself, and I paid every bill on time. Year 2, I hired my first employee, a guy named Terrence who I'd worked with during my apprenticeship. Year 3, 2 more. We landed our first real commercial contract, a restaurant group opening 3 locations in the Columbus metro area. I didn't tell my family any of this in detail. Not because I was hiding it. Because no one asked, "How's the business?" My mom would say at Sunday dinners. "Still going?" Like it was a puppy I was trying to keep alive. "Still going," I'd say. My brother's work was discussed differently. "Did you hear he's being considered for a regional manager role?" My mom said once, beaming. "He's being sent to a conference in Chicago next month." My dad would ask him about his 401k, his portfolio, whether his firm matched contributions. They spoke the language of his career fluently. Mine they'd never learned. I didn't say anything. I just ate my dinner and drove home. Last November, about 3 weeks before Thanksgiving, my mom called me on a Wednesday evening. "I wanted to talk to you about the holiday," she said. She had a particular voice she used when she was about to say something she'd already decided. Measured. A little too careful. "Your brother is bringing someone," she said. "Someone serious. We're having a small dinner, just the 4 of us, and her. He wants it to be comfortable. Low-key." I said okay. I understood. "What time should I come?" There was a pause. "That's the thing, sweetheart," she said. "Your brother asked, and I want to stress that this is his request, not mine." I waited. He'd prefer it just be the immediate family this year. And his girlfriend's background, her family is they're in finance and law. He just doesn't want there to be any awkward conversation about what I do. Another pause. He said he doesn't want her to get the wrong impression about where he comes from. She didn't correct me. I said, "Okay, Mom, you're not upset." I thought about it honestly. "I'm not sure yet," I said. "It's just 1 year." "Okay." We hung up. I sat in my truck in the parking lot of a hardware supply store for about 10 minutes. Then I went inside and bought the wire connectors I came for, and I drove back to the job site. I didn't call my brother. I didn't send a text. I didn't show up at their door or make a scene or call my grandmother to report what happened. I went home on Thanksgiving, made myself a full dinner, turkey breast, roasted potatoes, green beans from a bag, and watched a documentary about infrastructure. It was, genuinely, a fine day. My brother texted me that evening, "Hope you had a good holiday." I replied with a thumbs up. He sent a smiley face back. That was the whole conversation. What I didn't tell my family, what I hadn't told them for about 7 months at that point, was that we'd landed a contract. Not a maintenance contract. A build-out contract. A commercial real estate development group called Meridian Property Group was building a mixed-use complex on the east side of Columbus, retail on the ground floor, 5 floors of office space above. They'd put out a bid request. I'd spent 3 weeks on our proposal. We came in competitive on price, detailed on scope, and I had 3 reference letters from general contractors I'd worked with. We got the call in April. The contract was worth $340,000 over 14 months. I'd hired 2 more electricians, a project manager and a part-time bookkeeper before the job started. We were 8 people by the time we broke ground. I didn't tell my mom. I didn't tell my dad. I didn't tell my dad. I didn't tell my brother. Not out of strategy. Not because I was planning something. I'd gotten out of the habit of telling them things about work because the conversation always went nowhere, and I'd stopped expecting it to go anywhere. The project went well. We stayed on schedule through the summer. My project manager, a woman named Angela who'd been in the trades for 15 years, was the best hire I'd ever made. We passed every inspection. The general contractor, a company called Thornfield Construction, was the best I'd ever worked with, organized, responsive, fair. By October, we were in the final phase of the build-out. It was the second week of October when I met my brother's girlfriend. Not at a family dinner, not at a holiday, at the job site. She came in with the Meridian development team for a walkthrough. She was one of their attorneys. The team handled commercial real estate transactions, and she'd been on the Meridian account for 8 months. She was polished, professional, sharp in a way that was obvious within 30 seconds of watching her talk. Her name was Vivian. I recognized her from a photo my brother had texted me in August. "Finally found someone who tolerates me," he'd written. I'd responded with a heart. She was pretty, I'd thought. I'd forgotten about it almost immediately. I did not put it together right away. We shook hands during the walkthrough introductions. She didn't know my last name from anything. I was one of the subcontractors, not one of the principals, and she was there to walk the space, not to review the electrical scope. We spoke for maybe 4 minutes, mostly about the timeline for the final inspection. She asked smart questions. I answered them. She thanked me and moved on. She glanced at my card when I handed it to her. Leah Harmon Electric. Read it once, put it in her portfolio. I didn't say anything about my brother. Not because I was hiding something. Honestly, it didn't feel like my place. We weren't close yet. They'd been together about 6 months. My brother hadn't introduced us. I didn't know how she felt about me, or if she even knew I existed. Bringing it up at a job site walkthrough in front of the whole Meridian team felt like the wrong moment. So I said nothing. We finished the walkthrough. I went back to work. 2 weeks later, my brother called me. A real call, not a text. He almost never calls. "Hey," he said, Did you do the electrical work on the Meridian building? On Broadview?" "Yes," I said. Silence. "That's Vivian is one of their attorneys. She talked about the electrical contractor at dinner last week. Said you guys were excellent, professional, that the project came in on schedule." He paused. "I didn't know it was you." "I know," I said. "Why didn't you tell me?" I thought about how to answer that. "You didn't ask," I said. And I meant it as simple fact, not as an accusation. He'd never asked. Not once in 4 years had he asked what we were working on, what the company was doing, what I was building. He was quiet for a long time. "She looked up the contract value," he said finally. "After dinner. Because she was curious about the company." I didn't say anything. "Leah," he said. "Yeah, I didn't know the business was doing that." "I know," I said again. He exhaled. "I said something to her. Back in the summer, before she met you. I said I said it was a trade job. I made it sound smaller than it is, because I thought." He stopped. "I don't know what I thought. You thought it would be a weird thing to explain." "Yeah, because of Thanksgiving." Another silence. "Yeah." I sat with that for a moment. I wasn't angry in the way I expected to be angry. It was more like tired. The specific exhaustion of having been proven right about something you didn't want to be right about. "She's embarrassed," he said. "Vivian." She went back and told her supervisor that she'd met the owner at the walkthrough and just introduced herself like she didn't know. And her supervisor said that's the contractor who came in under budget. I hadn't told him that. We'd come in $11,000 under the original bid because we'd found a more efficient routing solution during rough-in. I passed the savings back to the client. "Standard practice." "That's good," I said. I liked working with her team. "Leah, but I'm sorry about Thanksgiving, about all of it. I didn't say it's okay because it wasn't entirely. But I didn't say I told you so because I'm not interested in that. I know, I said. We'll figure it out. My parents found out about the contract 3 days later. My brother told them. I didn't ask him to, and I didn't ask him to. He sat down with them on a Sunday and walked them through what the company was doing. The Meridian project, the contract value, the team size, the schedule. My mom called me that Sunday night. She was crying before she finished saying my name. I let her talk. She said she was proud of me. She said she should have asked more. She said she didn't understand what any of it meant. She still didn't fully understand what an electrical contractor did, she admitted. But she knew she should have tried. My dad got on the phone after a few minutes. He said, I looked up IBEW online today. He said, those are good wages. He said, you did a lot I didn't know about. Yeah, I said. I should have asked. Yeah, we weren't a family that did big emotional speeches. That was probably the most either of them had ever said about my work in my entire adult life. I sat in my kitchen and I held the phone, and I felt something that wasn't quite forgiveness and wasn't quite relief. Something smaller and more complicated than either of those. Thanksgiving this year, my dad said. You come first. Okay, I said. I had coffee with Vivian about 2 weeks later. She suggested it. She texted through my brother, a little awkwardly, to ask if I'd be open to meeting up. She wanted to apologize directly. We met at a coffee shop near German Village. She was already there when I arrived, already had her hands around a mug, and she looked genuinely uncomfortable. Not performed uncomfortable, but actually nervous in the way people are when they've done something they can't undo and they know it. I didn't know who you were at the walkthrough, she said first. I know. And I should say, even if I had known what he told me about your work, I shouldn't have taken that as the whole picture. She paused. My family's pretty traditional about certain things. White-collar work, credentials. I absorbed that more than I realized. I nodded. I drank my coffee. The work your team did on that building is genuinely excellent, she said. My supervisor has already mentioned you to 2 other developers in their network. I didn't know that. I made a note to follow up. I don't want this to be awkward, she said. Between us, I mean. He really cares about you. He talks about you. She hesitated. He talks about you more than he realizes he does. I looked at her. She seemed like someone who said what she meant, which I respected. It doesn't have to be awkward, I said. We're both adults. We both just learned something. She smiled at that a little tentatively. I'm going to be honest with you, I said. The thing at Thanksgiving, that's something he and I are still working through. That's not about you. I know, she said. He knows, but you asked decent questions at the walkthrough, and your team was organized. I'd work with Meridian again. She looked a little surprised. Then she laughed, just briefly. Good, she said. That's good. We talked for another 30 minutes. About the building, mostly, the routing solution. She was actually curious about the technical side of it, asked real questions. I found myself explaining load calculations for the 5th floor in terms she could follow, and she followed them. By the time I walked back to my truck, something had loosened that I hadn't known was tight. I didn't grow up dreaming of running a company. I grew up taking apart things to understand them. And somewhere in that habit was everything I needed to know about what kind of person I was going to be. Trade school didn't make me who I am, but it gave me the right language, the right tools. 5 years of an apprenticeship where every day you either learned something or you didn't, and no one gave you credit for things you hadn't done yet. My brother and I had dinner in December, just the 2 of us, no parents, no Vivian. He picked the restaurant, Italian place he liked near downtown. We talked about the building project, about Vivian, about my team. About things we hadn't talked about in years. He said at some point over pasta, I always thought I was the one who had it figured out. I know, I said. That was stupid. A little bit. He laughed. Then I laughed. It didn't fix everything, but it was somewhere to start. I drove home that night to the east side of Columbus, and I took a detour past Broadview Street without fully deciding to. The Meridian building was lit up inside. Tenants had started moving in the week before. 6 floors of light against a November sky. I built that. My team built that. I started the truck again and headed home. There was an email from one of the developers in Meridian's network waiting in my inbox when I got there. Subject line: Electrical contractor referral. New project in Westerville. I made a cup of tea. I sat down at my kitchen table. I wrote back. I've thought a lot about what actually happened. Not the Thanksgiving part, not the job site walkthrough, but the longer arc underneath all of it. The thing is, my brother didn't do what he did because he was a bad person. He did it because he'd spent years building a version of success in his head and I didn't fit it. That picture, the one where success looks like a downtown office and a salary and a conference in Chicago, that picture wasn't something he invented. Our parents gave it to him. Our schools gave it to him. Somewhere along the way, nobody corrected it. And I think about how easy it would have been to stay small in that story. To let being excluded from one Thanksgiving become a reason to stop showing up entirely. To let someone else's embarrassment become my own. I didn't do that. Not because I'm exceptional, because I was too busy to. That's the honest answer. When you're running conduit through a drop ceiling for 8 hours, you don't have a lot of room left over for other people's opinions about what you should be doing instead. The work has a way of filling in the space where resentment would otherwise sit. I think that's the thing nobody talks about when they talk about trades. About learning a skill with your hands. The way it grounds you. There's no faking it. You either wired it right or you didn't. The circuit either works or it doesn't. That kind of feedback, day after day for 5 years, does something to your relationship with doubt. You stop needing other people to confirm that you're doing okay, because the work tells you. What I learned from all of this, from my brother's phone call, from sitting across the coffee shop table from Vivian, from my dad saying, I looked up IBEW today, is that the people who matter will eventually catch up. Not because you forced them to, not because you made a point of it, but because reality has a way of making its case over time, if you're patient enough to let it. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I was just working, and that's what made it land the way it did, because there was no performance to it, no moment where I turned around and said, see? I was just there, doing what I'd always done. And eventually the people I loved looked up and actually saw it. That's not a guarantee, by the way. Some people never look up. I know that. But I think you have to do the work anyway. Not for the moment when someone finally notices, but because the work itself is worth doing. Because you made something real. Because somewhere on Broadview Street there's a building with 6 lit floors and my company's name on the permit, and that exists regardless of whether my family ever understood what it took to get there. What I want, if I'm being honest, is for the people watching this to hear the part that comes before the resolution. The years of Sunday dinners where nobody asked. The thumbs up text on Thanksgiving night. The very quiet decision, made over and over again, to keep going anyway. That's the part that actually cost something. And that's the part that made everything else possible.